Good evening. Okay, let's get started. My name is Peter Kariva, and I'm the CEO and president of the Aquarium of Pacific, and welcome to our first Wednesday series. If you don't know the routine, if this is your first time, we have talk for about 35 minutes with plenty of time for questions afterwards here in the audience. Afterwards, we adjourn outside where you came in, where there's a book signing. So we call it cocktails, conversation, and crafts. So we have all those afterwards. And about the first, I want to acknowledge our sponsors, the Olsons and their trust, and the Courtyard by Marriott. But I would say the purpose of these Wednesday evening monthly talks is really for the public to learn about environmental issues and to learn about animals and plants. Many of us who work here at the aquarium, we got into this because we're just fascinated by animals. I see Nate there. Many of the staff are, many of our volunteers are. I got into the business because I just would, started looking at animals. And baby animals are special. I was a zoologist, and there's something about babies. It's bad being a zoologist and having your own babies, because then you observe them for all their evolutionary tricks and what they're doing. But Dr. Danna Staaf, this is the third book that I'm aware of she's written. They're terrific, and always she has a special dress for her book, and you'll see that tonight. I've suggested to her that she should pick the dress first next, and then decide on the book. But with that as an introduction, Dr. Danna Staaf, thanks for coming back.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you so much. Lovely introduction. I'll do my twirl. Thank you. So I was here a little over a year ago to talk about cephalopods, octopuses and squid. Now I think there might be some people in the audience who came just last month. Any hands to the Octopus Talk by Simon Montgomery and Warren Carlisle? It was amazing. So lucky for you, I'm not talking about cephalopods this time, so no rehashing of familiar ground. I love them very much. I actually, when I was working full-time as a marine biologist, I studied squid babies. And that's how I got into this topic of animal babies more generally, because I was so interested in how an animal goes from a single cell. That's what an egg is. A fertilized egg is a single cell, and it divides and divides, and it becomes this wonderful, complicated organism. And that's as true for squid as it is for humans, as it is for all of the other animals on the planet. And I'm also really excited to be back here at the aquarium because it's an amazing aquarium, and it has a babies exhibit upstairs. Has anybody been to that exhibit? I know it's been here for a while because it was here the last time. And just today, I got to go up there and see baby lumpsucker fish. A little shout out, if you haven't been to see the baby lumpsuckers, check them out before they become grown-up lumpsuckers, which are almost as adorable as baby lumpsuckers, but not completely. They're close. So I also wanted to say, right at the start, today, while I was walking in Long Beach, I saw some baby animals. And now if you've ever seen a baby animal while you're walking, you probably stop and go, oh, whether it's like a puppy or a row of ducklings or something. And today, I saw so many baby animals. It wasn't like one, it wasn't like a row of ducklings. I saw hundreds of baby animals. So of course I had to stop and admire them. And I'm going to tell you where they are, because they're still there, and you can go and see them anytime you want. They are here. This is the Laugh Factory, just like a few minutes walk, and this arrow is showing you exactly where they are. They're in this scummy water that's in the fountain. Hundreds of babies, you guys. So some of you may have guessed already what kind of baby animals they are. If you haven't guessed yet, I need to give you a heads up that insects are actually animals. Not everybody knows or remembers that. And these baby animals that I saw today were baby mosquitoes. Thousands of them. Now, if you've never seen baby mosquitoes, for some of us, this may be the first time learning that they're aquatic. It's kind of weird. A lot of insects that fly as adults swim as babies. So they go through this incredible transition. It's not just like a human going from like playing in a sandbox as a child to driving a truck as an adult. It's like this animal is completely aquatic, lives in the water, swims in the water, and then it becomes an animal that flies as an adult, which totally blows my mind. Anyway, baby mosquitoes are aquatic. They're actually pretty cute if you can forget that they're going to grow up to be bloodsuckers. They look an awful lot like tadpoles, believe it or not. I have looked into water and had a hard time telling which were tadpoles and which were mosquito larvae, baby mosquito, until I looked a little bit closer. The mosquito larvae sort of twitch in a very distinctive way. But if you are not happy about these mosquito larvae, rest assured I saw another baby in that water, and this baby was eating the mosquito larvae. I had to look it up. I didn't know what it was. There's so many aquatic insects. This turns out to be the baby of a diving beetle. And these baby beetles are so voracious, such fierce predators, that people actually call them water tigers. So there you go, there's a little tiger cub. Go and check it out in the scummy water there next to the Laugh Factory. This isn't even all. There was yet another baby in there that was still in the egg. So I found this tiny little egg mass. And it's just because I'm a huge nerd that I even recognized it as an egg mass. But I have studied egg masses for many years. Egg masses of squid actually look a lot like this tiny little brown thing on my fingertip, only like 200 times bigger. So all of the little brown dots in that teeny thing are baby insects, they're eggs. And again, I had to look this one up. This one turns out to be not mosquito eggs, not diving beetle eggs, but midge eggs. And non-biting midge eggs, for anybody who was worried. So this is a great place to go and see baby animals. I'm not going to argue that it's better than the aquarium, because obviously the aesthetics leave a little to be desired. And I love coming here and seeing the baby animals here. But I did just want to show you this as a little bit of a sort of a brain-bending, expanding idea that it is possible, if you are a huge nerd, to be just as excited about animal babies that you find in scummy pond water as animal babies that are on display in a beautiful aquarium. All right, that's enough of making you look at the less adorable versions. Here's my kitten. This is my cat, Grasshopper, our family's cat. He's 16 now, but he was a very adorable baby. And I think that one of the most fundamental things that really draws us in about the babies of almost any animal species, possibly excepting mosquitoes, is how cute they are. And I just want to point out as a biologist that that is not coincidental. The things that are cute to us, over time, these have evolved as traits that the baby animals have to get care from their animal parents. And I also have children, so I have that experience of observing in them these behaviors and traits that are very difficult to ignore, whether they're adorable or not. So this is a baby cat, obviously. I was going to show you a couple of other babies that I think we can all agree are adorable, but are a little bit less obvious. This particular baby is called a puggle, and it's a baby echidna. Echidnas and platypuses actually both have babies that look fairly similar and are both called puggles. So if you were guessing one or the other, it's understandable. One of my favorite things about puggles, actually I have two favorite things. One is that they're so cute, they're actually named after a plush animal. Because scientists were studying these guys for a long time without having a particular name for them. They were just baby echidnas and baby platypuses. And then one time, a scientist who studied baby echidnas was in a store in Australia, since that's where they live mostly, and saw this brand of plushie called a puggle, and was like, that kind of looks like a baby echidna. And so they co-opted the word puggle to describe baby echidnas and baby platypuses. My other favorite thing about them is that they are mammals like us, so they need to drink milk, but they are not the kind of mammal that has a teat or a nipple. They are a different kind of mammal that just sweats milk right out of their skin. So mom echidnas sweat milk, and baby echidnas lap it up, which is what this baby echidna is doing with this zookeeper right here. And then finally, my last survey of just basically adorable animals. Thank you so much. I showed this to my kids, and one of them in particular, hi kids, was like, that's not cute. So thank you for the awe. I appreciate that. This is a baby condor, and I do think that they are incredibly cute. Condor babies go through several different stages of having pink heads and then having black heads and then having red heads again. They go through a very interesting set of dynamics. So all of these babies here are sort of bringing us into this vision of what is the quintessential animal baby. It's small, right? It's going to be smaller than the adults because it is developing, it's growing its body. It often has very large or sort of very different proportions. Parts of its body that are really important to grow early get big early, like a head, like eyes, often like the limbs that it's moving with, like the large paws of a kitten, for example, or like the beak of a bird needs to be big enough to eat, even if its wings are not big enough to fly. And then we're going to go through a few other sort of universals of babies and also find out the exceptions along the way. But the big picture here is that it really is amazing to me how, of all of the animals and all of the babies in the world, how much they share with each other, how much we all share as we're going through this process of growth. And it's important, not just because they're adorable, but because they really are the majority of animal life on the planet. So at any given moment, if you were to add up all of the animals on planet Earth and sort of divide them into babies, larvae, children, whatever you want to call the sort of young stages, and adults, most of them would be in this young stage category. And if you think about it, that's a sort of bittersweet reality. It's because most of them will not make it all the way to being a mature adult. So that is the way animal life cycles work, is that pretty much every species produces more babies than can grow up. And so there's attrition along the way. And that means that these babies, in addition to forming the future by becoming the adults who will then become the future inhabitants of the earth, are also feeding the future because they're preying on each other, they're being eaten by other babies, they're being eaten by adults. And as in the case of this nest of robin eggs, probably only 2 of these eggs will survive to adulthood to lay their own nest. But of course, birds are just the tip of the iceberg as far as overproducing babies. You can consider this opossum mom who is a little bit overburdened with her youth. I learned something interesting about opossums. They have, I believe, exactly 13 nipples. And so if they have a brood that's more than that, then they either have to share or somebody doesn't get any, and that's the beginning of the attrition. But these things are all land animals, and land animals in general are not the prototypes of making lots of babies. That happens in the ocean, and this is clownfish, or as I heard everybody saying as they went through the aquarium today, a Nemo fish. As you may recall, if you watch the movie Finding Nemo, Nemo fish or clownfish make lots and lots of eggs, and most of them do not encounter such an abrupt tragedy as marlin did, but most of them do in fact lose the large portion of their brood on the way to adulthood. So this is, maybe hundreds of babies here, but even that is nothing compared to the squid, which can produce an egg mass. Do you see the similarity here? Yeah, this is huge. It's bigger than a person. But this is why I was able to recognize that egg mass in the scummy green water. Anyway, this is a squid egg mass, a particular kind of squid called a diamondback squid. And each of these it's like a strand of pearls wrapped around a bunch of jelly. And each little pearl is an egg, a baby squid. And there are thousands upon thousands of baby squid in this egg mass that was produced by one female squid. And some squid can even lay 1 million eggs. So, just to give you a little context of how many babies are in the world, they way outnumber us. And I think that's really cool. Babies are also just generally important, largely through their numbers, but also because they're growing. And so, as anybody knows, if you've had growing children in your household year after year, you start being really astonished by the number of groceries that you're buying. And so in the wild, babies like caterpillars, and yes, all caterpillars are baby animals. They're going to go through metamorphosis and become some kind of insect as an adult. And when they're babies, they are starving. The very hungry caterpillar is no joke. So all of these babies are eating. So this probably looks familiar to you if you've ever had caterpillars or grubs or other little insects invade your garden. So we know that babies are important in terms of the food that they are taking in, and it can really affect human agriculture. All of the big agricultural pests are pretty much all baby animals, and then all of the there's a lot of other pests as well, things that we call or consider pests because they're affecting things that we don't want them to affect. This is the ash borer beetle, but it's not the adult beetle that killed this tree. It's the baby beetle that ate through all of that bark and left that trail behind, and ended up killing off the tree. So babies in their vast numbers can have vast impacts. And they can have vast impacts on each other, because remember, they're also eating each other as well as eating our gardens and our crops and everything. And so one of the most effective forms of pest control for what we consider to be crop pests are other babies. This is a wasp. This is a grown-up wasp, so we don't really care about her except insofar as she can lay eggs. And this is a picture of that adult wasp laying an egg inside of a caterpillar. So this begins the battle of the babies. And inside this caterpillar, that baby wasp is going to grow, and there are going to be more baby wasps. We'll get to that later. And it comes to a point where the caterpillar becomes full of nothing but baby wasps. And I didn't really anticipate how giant this screen was when I put this picture in here, so my apologies to everybody for having to look at that. Here, look at this instead. It's also gross, but it's sort of gross in a more abstract way. This is what happens after all of the baby wasps have gone through their metamorphosis. All the little white things are their empty chrysalises. They have grown up, matured, and left behind their caterpillar host. And if you think this probably kills the caterpillar, you are absolutely right. And that is good from the point of view of people who want to use these wasps as biocontrol. And all around the world, agricultural crops are protected through this form of biocontrol, releasing the wasps who will lay the eggs that will hatch into the baby wasps that will kill the baby caterpillars and protect the crops. All babies, all the way down. And everybody, of course, has babies, all animals. We sort of know this to be true as a general fact. We're used to birds laying eggs, and we're used to seeing maybe eggs all around us at a certain time of year. In the spring, it's sort of an eggy time, and I saw those eggs in the water. These are fish eggs that I think are pretty neat because they're snail fish that live in very deep water. And so it's just a little reminder that everything all over the world lays eggs. These really bright, pretty blue capsules, almost like blue like a robin's egg, are the eggs of some kind of snail. I found them in a tide pool just wandering around on the coast. And I still don't know what species they belong to because I asked a bunch of marine biologist friends and everybody said they look like cone snail eggs, but I don't know any cone snail that lays blue eggs. So if you're in the audience and these look familiar to you, please come and see me after the talk. Eggs, a mystery. So yeah, so everybody lays eggs. This is how animals make more animals. This is how the future is made. This is how generations go on, with some interesting exceptions that I will now delve into because it brings us back to those wasps multiplying inside of that caterpillar. And I will show you the less gross picture to remind you of that. What happens when a wasp lays an egg inside a caterpillar, if it's the right species of wasp, is that egg hatches and the shortly before it hatches, the embryo clones itself. And it clones itself hundreds of times. So all of those babies inside the larger baby are actually baby clones of each other. And cloning yourself is not limited to weird wasp babies. Anemones also clone themselves. If you've ever seen a tide pool that looks like this, with lots of little sort of brownish, yellowish anemones in them, they are probably all clones of each other. And these guys clone themselves as adults. So that's a grown-up anemone breaking in half and in half again and in half again and half again. Cloning is actually a great way of reproducing yourself if you already got a sure thing. So in the case of the wasp egg, it has been laid in a caterpillar. It's got a sure source of food. So make more of yourself as fast as you can. And in the anemone's case, if they live in a tide pool where they're getting enough food and it's a successful location, it's a lot faster to just split in half to make more of yourself than it is to go through the whole process of producing eggs or producing sperm and having to find a mate and having to mix them and having them grow up. But all animals still do reproduce through eggs and through babies. Even the ones that do cloning like this, it's only sort of a secondary partial side thing. And even anemones that are famous for cloning still make babies. I love this picture because it's really heartwarming once you actually understand what's going on here. There is a large mom anemone here. And all around her, this is like the opossum with all of the babies on her back. These are all her little baby anemones here. And they're just hanging out, and she's keeping them safe when she's sort of having a nap right now, which I would also need a nap if I had this many babies on me all the time. But when she stretches out her tentacles, she can shelter them from predators, she can make sure that they get enough food, and eventually they'll sort of oonch away and find their own space when they're ready, not sooner. So I think this is just a little side note to be like, there are other ways of reproducing, but making eggs and making babies tends to still be the really important central approach. And then, of course, those babies are getting care from their parents in surprising cases, like the sea anemone that actually has its babies on it. And of course, this seahorse, as you may know if you have explored the aquarium or learned this other places, this is the father seahorse who becomes pregnant with the eggs and then gives birth when they hatch. This is a beautiful shot of that father seahorse actually giving birth to the babies while they were inside of his pouch. He was not just keeping them safe from predators, but also providing an exchange of oxygen and probably even some nutrients, not too different from a human pregnancy. I was really surprised actually when I started researching pregnancy and finding out how many animals do it. There's an incredible array. There are worms that keep their babies, their eggs inside until they hatch. There are insects that do it. There's flies that give live birth, tsetse flies, that have the egg inside them, and it develops all the way into an adorable little baby fly, which sounds cute until you remember that baby flies are called maggots, so we'll just set that aside. And it has this adorable little baby fly, and it gives birth to the baby fly, which is beautiful and amazing. But of course, not all animals do that. There's plenty of examples of animals that lay their eggs and die, lay their eggs and walk off, lay their eggs and disappear. But even in those cases, it's worth remembering that those eggs have been cared for. When an egg is laid, or in this case, a mass of eggs, each of the little sort of yolky yellow things is a single worm egg, that in itself is an act of parental care, because the animal laying those eggs has packed nutrients in. That's what the yolk is in a chicken egg. They've packed in nutrients. They've usually packed in all sorts of sort of genetic factors that will help the egg to develop, that will help it as it carries on. So it's just sort of a question of like, do you sit with your baby or do you send it off to boarding school? But in either way, there's a huge investment of resources. And in the case of these worm eggs, this is one of my favorite examples of parental care. So the greenish things are worms that have already hatched. And none of these other worm eggs are going to hatch, even though they are perfectly good worm eggs, because these little worms are going to eat them. And that is on purpose. These are called nurse eggs, and the mom deliberately lays extra eggs for the few ones that hatch early to eat. It's one way of providing nutrition for your babies. So they're all getting some sort of parental care from their parents, with the exception of a certain type of behavior that is famous in birds, but other animals can do it too, and that's called cuckoo behavior. This is when parents deliberately shove off the whole burden to somebody else. And these are two totally different species of birds. But one of them is a cuckoo. It has evolved to look exactly like the chick of its host, the chick of the parents that it is trying to trick into feeding it. And so, oh, sorry, let me go back a little bit there. There's an ant coming, but don't pay attention to the birds. This is the host chick, and it has this super fancy beak that's like a target for the parent. It's like stuff worms here. Put the worms here. And so the cuckoo that parasitizes this nest, the adult cuckoo bird lays an egg in the same nest as this, and when the egg hatches, it has the exact same pattern in its mouth, and it's a little bit bigger and it's a little bit louder. Put food here! And so that's how cuckoos make a living. So there is, I think it really just goes to show how important parental care is, that the ability to get somebody else to do it for you has evolved multiple times in multiple different species, including not ants, but butterflies. This is a baby butterfly, a caterpillar, believe it or not, that has tricked this ant into taking care of it. This particular species of butterfly, their babies smell exactly like baby ants. And so when they hatch out of their eggs and they fall on the ground, they're giving off a smell that says, help, help, I'm a baby ant. And the ants who are walking around find it and they smell it and they go, oh no, somebody left a baby outside. That's so irresponsible. And they pick up the baby and they bring it back into their nest and they feed it and they take care of it. And it's a great life for the baby butterfly, who then eventually just leaves the nest behind and goes and metamorphoses and becomes a beautiful adult butterfly. So this is very cool. This is the importance of parental care. Then, as we've been seeing, the babies themselves do a lot. We have those baby cuckoos and the baby butterflies that are kind of tricking other parents into taking care of them. And babies in general are way more competent than I think we tend to give them credit for. This is a baby tuna fish, believe it or not, but it's teeny tiny and it's transparent. And I think what's so cool about this is that an adult tuna is a large, fast-swimming predatory animal. And when it hatches out of a tiny egg, it can't do that. And so a completely different lifestyle has evolved to being transparent so that it's almost impossible for predators to spot them, and having these gigantic mouths. Like this mouth to body ratio is way different than an adult tuna. And it's so they can scoop up anything in the vicinity that they could possibly eat. And then here's a baby squid. This is a baby Humboldt squid, the type that I studied. As adults, they're about as big as me. This baby is about the size of a grain of rice. And it has evolved a whole different shape to its body, just kind of like a kitten is not exactly shaped like an adult cat, or a baby human. It has that big bobbly head and the short little arms. This baby squid has a body that's more like a jellyfish, and it actually swims more like a jellyfish because that works better when you're the size of a grain of rice. And it's, instead of being transparent, it has these colored chromatophores on its body that some of you may have remembered from last month, the ability of octopuses and squid and other cephalopods to change color. That ability actually is present from before they even hatch, which is pretty amazing. And then back to caterpillars. I can't get enough of these guys. This caterpillar is called the Mad Hatterpillar. I love this guy. And the way this caterpillar protects itself is every time it molts. So an insect, just like a crab or anything else with a hard exoskeleton, as it's growing, it has to molt. It has to take off the old skin and grow a new one. Otherwise, there's nowhere for it to grow. So all caterpillars do that, but only the Mad Hatterpillar, as it grows, it keeps the old head. So here's the baby head, and then there's the slightly bigger head. There's a slightly bigger head, bigger head. There's today's head. And it stacks them up like that, as far as anyone can tell, just to completely creep out predators. I would not eat that. Would you eat that? I assume not. So babies are really, really good at protecting themselves, at getting the food they need, at hiding from predators. But that said, I think there's kind of an elephant in the room, because all of us who ever were a baby or have had a baby know that human babies are completely incompetent. And adorable, but completely incompetent. And there's a reason, though. It's because our species and many other species, like birds that have blind, featherless chicks, and there's a whole range of species that have what's called altricial young, young that needs to be cared for, that cannot find its own food, hide from predators by itself, stack its old heads on top of its head, whatever it is. So these are my children. I get to inflict baby pictures on you. And thank you, kids in the audience, for letting me do that. They are, in fact, demonstrating how even though human babies cannot feed themselves or protect themselves, they are perfectly adapted to their own environment, which is an environment in which they have adults doing those things for them. And so they are actually freed up, in a sense, to do other things for themselves. They have reflexes. My daughter is showing this startle reflex that she would do every time she was asleep and you startled her, fling her arms up in the air. And these sort of reflexes that babies have help their bodies and their muscles to develop as they're getting larger, as they're needing to become toddlers, and then children, and then adults. And then here's my son tasting the ground, which is also a really important thing that human babies do. They're really good at getting different stuff into their mouths to help seed their immune system and to help seed their digestive system so that they have the right bacteria and things in there to help them start digesting things. And I should say, there are animals that are even more useless than humans, and those are the baby kangaroos. This is a newborn kangaroo. This is a very, very tiny thing. It's right there. That's where it came out. And I mean, it really looks like it should still be inside. Yeah, I'm like, put it back in, it needs to cook more. But that's when they come out looking like that. And they are able to, again, be perfectly adapted to their environment. So the environment of this newborn kangaroo is its mother's body. And it has arms that are strong enough to climb into the pouch. And it can do that. It climbs into the pouch, it finds a teat to latch onto, and it suckles, and it grows, and it grows, and it grows in there. So really, all babies are competent, is what I'm getting at here. They're just perfectly suited to whatever environment they have adapted to be in. And of course, babies grow up. That is the inevitable result of all of this, is that they are the future adults. This is a kangaroo, of course, well on its way to adulthood, still getting some sustenance from its parent. This is a young condor with the black head. This is a juvenile, and this is an adult. Something interesting I learned while reading this book is that condors actually have really strong parent-child bonds. And even as their children develop, just kind of like a young kangaroo, into adolescence, into young adults, they continue to have this strong bond with their parents, which I think is just really heartwarming to see that we're not the only species that does that they have this ongoing relationship. And there is yet one more exception to this. There are animals that do something called neoteny, which is retaining features of their babyhood all the way through adulthood. This has become a very popular animal on the internet, so you probably recognize it. It's called an axolotl, and the axolotl is famous for keeping its gills, because like those aquatic insects I was talking about, the gills and the water breathing are a baby feature in axolotls. And what other salamanders do, they're a type of salamander, is they lose the gills and they become terrestrial. They walk around on land, but not the axolotl. It's like, if the gills were good enough for me as a baby, they're good enough for me as an adult. And they stay in the water and they keep breathing, and their body becomes mature enough to reproduce while they still have this, what we think of as a baby form. And interestingly, there's another weird pink and wrinkled little thing that is similar. That's the naked mole rat. I really think these two should get together. I think they have a lot in common. I think they would get along really well. I'm not sure whether they should do it in the water or on land, but they'll figure it out. The naked mole rat is actually considered to be somewhat neotenous as well. It has this sort of hairless, pink, wrinkled skin, and a number of other features that even as an adult are very similar to when it was a baby, when it was born and as it was developing. And interestingly, both of these animals are being studied by scientists who are trying to figure out what it is about them that lets them kind of stay young, because it isn't just looks. They also are very resilient or seemingly impervious to what we think of as diseases of age. The naked mole rats in particular don't seem to get a lot of the things that come with aging in a number of other mammals. And so scientists are trying to figure out what it is that is allowing them to do that. And so it just goes to show that babies are important, and the way that babies develop into adults is a fascinating thing to be studying. Now, the last thing that I wanted to really highlight about babies is that they are connection formers. We don't really think of them this way, but they are the kind of the needles and threads, I think, that connect all sorts of different places around the world. A lot of babies travel a lot more than their adults do. And this is illustrated by a short story that I wanted to tell about an animal that is very weird looking as a baby. These are baby starfish, baby sea stars. And they kind of bring together a lot of things that we've been talking about. This particular baby starfish was found in the Caribbean, and they are aquatic. They swim in the water. They don't settle down and crawl around the way an adult starfish kind of gloms onto things. And because they're loose in the water, they can move way more than adult starfish. Adult starfish, as you may have noticed if you've ever stared at them through the aquarium wall, look cool and pretty, but don't move very fast and don't do very much. All of the action, all of the movement, and all of the maybe transporting from one tide pool to another, or from one beach to another, or from one reef to another happens in the larval stage. And so these 6 guys up here are larval starfish, and the particular species that they are is able to clone. And so these larvae were found cloning themselves like those embryonic wasp larvae inside of the caterpillar. And they were making more larvae. They were reproducing as babies. And for years and years, although people were, there we go. Although people were finding them in the Caribbean, nobody knew what adult they belonged to. Until finally a researcher took them and got enough of them to sample their DNA. Now, if you sample DNA, unfortunately, what you get is a really long string of A's and C's and G's and T's, which you can't take those 4 letters and spell out, I belong to the species XYZ. What you have to do is then take that sequence and see if there's a match somewhere else. Does this match any other sequence of DNA that another scientist has found? And this scientist who sequenced the DNA did find a match. She found this adult, which is a very pretty little sea star that lives all the way over here in the Indo-Pacific. And she found that these guys belong to the same species. And so incredibly, what must be happening is that there must be larvae that are able to cross basically 2 entire oceans, the whole Indian Ocean, and somehow get around the Cape of Africa and across the Atlantic Ocean and get to the Caribbean. And it might be something about cloning that allows them to do that. Maybe by cloning themselves along the way, they're a little more resilient to any sort of difficult things that they might encounter. The scientists are still trying to figure out what's going on. But I think this is a perfect example of babies as needles and thread. These traveling babies are stitching together ecosystems because they're connecting all across the ocean, one place to another, the predators from that area to the prey of another, the genetics of here to the genetics of there. And they're doing this. It's not, this might seem like kind of a weird, oddball, irrelevant case because it's cloning starfish and who cares. But they're doing this all the time. Another great example is the zebra mussel, which has become somewhat famous as what we call an invasive species, which, similar to pest, is just a term that people use when an animal or a plant is in a place that they don't like, often due to people putting it there. And these zebra mussels are considered an invasive species in the US. They encrust everything. They cause a lot of economic damage. And this map shows how they have spread from their origin in Europe all around the continent of North America, basically, causing lots of problems. And they didn't get there as adults. They got there as babies. This is what a baby zebra mussel looks like. It's kind of like a little tiny taco. And like the baby sea stars, they swim free in the water. And they got carried in ship ballast, which is water that ships pick up in one place and carry to another, all the way across the Atlantic. So unlike the sea star larvae, they didn't do it themselves, but they don't really care. Babies are opportunistic. They don't care who gave them the candy. They're going to eat the candy. And so they have done amazingly well for themselves over here. And I think it's just interesting to point out that when they cause problems, we don't like it, and we call them an invasive species. And when they create something beautiful for us to look at, then we get proud of them. As in the case of coral larvae, which are also really good at traveling from reef to reef and reseeding reefs. And in fact, that's why a lot of coral species have ranges that look like this. The dark green is showing you that this particular species of coral is spread all across the Indian Ocean, all across the Indo-Pacific, and even across to the coast of the Americas. And it gets that far not because the adults break off and travel that far, but because the larvae do. And this is the tiny little little slug-like larva of a coral, and when they are able to travel, they can often recolonize reefs that have suffered bleaching events. And in fact, scientists are studying how to help them travel even farther, and perhaps how to develop sort of genetically more resilient corals that can reseed reefs and deal with rising temperatures and ocean acidification. So it's all kind of in the eye of the beholder whether we feel like we're trying to get rid of a problem that we caused or solve a problem by helping the babies go farther or trying to keep them from going farther. It's a bit of food for thought. And the final connection to this is that in addition to connecting different places around the globe and different ecosystems, babies also connect the past to the future. And I think that the cicada is the classic example of this. The periodical cicada are species that live underground for 13 or 17 years as babies, and then emerge to live for only a few weeks as adults. This is the life cycle of the periodical cicada. You may have seen in the news, or maybe people online may even live in parts of the US that are expecting a huge cicada emergence as soon as it gets warm enough. The last time there was a really big emergence of periodical cicadas was in 2021, and I actually flew to Washington, D.C. to see it, because I'd never seen it, and I really wanted to. And I will tell you, it was worth the flight, because I could watch this happen as many times as I wanted. And it's very cool. It's metamorphosis. So what happens is after they're 13 or 17 years underground, which the cicada nymphs are living very carefully. It's not like they're not sleeping beauties down there. It's not like they're passed out waiting for somebody to come and kiss them. They are carefully sucking the sap from trees and sampling that sap to count the passage of the seasons as it changes over the year and as this tree responds to the seasons. And the scientists are still not sure of the details, but somehow they're keeping track. So they know exactly when they've gotten to either 13 or 17 years, and when everybody else in what's called their brood, their group, sort of their peer group that they're going to want to reproduce with, everybody else has also gotten to that number, so they can all come out at the same time, which is the success of the periodical cicada. When you have millions emerging at the same time, you have plenty of people to reproduce with, and it doesn't matter if the birds eat half of you, because there's more than enough to go around. The birds and the squirrels actually eat to satiation, and there's still cicadas singing in the trees. And so this process of those babies living that extended and careful life underground in order to have this outcome, I think is just such a beautiful example of development, of the importance of babies in creating the world that we see around us, and also kind of a reminder that development, that process of growing, changing, learning, and adapting to our environment is forever. It's not something that we stop, that we necessarily go, childhood is done, I am done developing, and nothing ever is going to change again. In fact, research is showing that even things like menopause and balding are developmental processes. And so we are going through development all throughout our lifetimes. We always have the opportunity to undergo metamorphosis when we're ready to outgrow our old skin and try something new. And I think that that's probably my favorite thing that I've learned from studying baby animals. And I'll leave it with that.
Turn the lights up and have questions, or should we be people walking around, volunteers walking around with mics?
Thank you. That was wonderful.
Thank you.
I don't know if I'm not looking in the right places, but having lived here 52 years, I've never really seen a baby pelican or a baby seagull. They're always adults. And the other thing is, unlike my body, they don't either gain or lose weight. They're all the same. Why is that?
Those are two really interesting and combined questions. Thank you so much. I will go second and then first. The weight thing, I think, is related to being a flying animal. That they have to be there's a very narrow window of sort of mass that the wings of a certain wingspan can actually carry through the sky. And so this is now something that I want to look up because I don't know all of the details, but I would guess that they have a whole set of adaptations where they're kind of internally monitoring the size of their body and kind of taking whatever nutrition they need from the food that they're eating and discarding the rest to keep themselves within that, like, I can get in the air sort of weight. And as for seeing baby seagulls and baby pelicans, now I want to see baby seagulls and pelicans. I haven't seen them either. I think that they have pretty secluded nests, probably as a protection against predators, but I don't know much about their nesting habits. I'm going to look it up now. I've seen juvenile seagulls. Have you seen the ones where they're like almost the same size as the adults, but they're colored differently and they're begging? See, if you see seagulls, we have a few different species of seagulls around here, but if you see ones and you watch them long enough, sometimes you'll see these seagulls that are basically adult sized, but are following the adults around begging for food. I don't know who has a microphone. I see a hand over here, though.
That was so wonderful, and
Thank you.
so appreciate the humor and the stand-up comedy that you brought in. So, and as I walked in a little bit late, there was the orange tabbing on the screen, kitty cat, which I have one. So I thought, okay, thank you for sharing. So, two things. I thought it was one question per customer, but the last woman asked two questions.
You can do it. Squeak them in.
So it's quick. So I spent a lot of time in my garden and fascinated by nature, always studying, learning. A number of years ago, found a very unusual looking spider, and even the gardeners didn't know what it was. I looked it up. Green lynx spider has an actual cat face on its back. Just wondering if you were familiar with it. And it was pregnant. It was the mother, which they laid about 500 babies in my garden. And the thing was so beautiful. And I have a picture of it. I can show you after if you want.
Yes,
But
please.
the thing is that I thought all spiders weave a web and catch their food, but a lynx spider does not. And the reason it's called a lynx spider is because it's like a cat and leaps at its prey. So I took a picture, but I didn't get too close. So I don't know if you're familiar with the green lynx. It's fascinating. I think the cat face scares off predators.
I will have to look up that particular spider. I know two spiders that are similar. There are spiders that have some really ridiculous patterns on their abdomen. Some of them to scare off predators, and some of them I think actually as part of their courtship. They attract each other with the interesting patterns. And yeah, it turns out that the classic web spinning spider, the orb weaver, is just one kind of spider. And then you have your jumping spiders and your, yeah.
I didn't realize, but
It's cool.
it's beautiful. And so, and it was pregnant. So anyway, found that. And then the second quick thing is that, so I'm always finding things, when we're attending to the garden. And I found this very strange, I don't know if it was a hive or a nest, these tiny little things in these two particular trees. I asked like 4 gardeners and tree specialists, nobody knew what it was. Couldn't figure out. I didn't know the good thing about it. Anyway, my friend down the street, her father is a gardener who specializes in insects. He's got a passion for insects. So it's a praying mantis egg case.
Oh yeah, very
So
cool.
now I know what they look like, and now I know why there's so many baby praying mantises around my house certain time of year. Anyway, so I learned all about that, but it's like a cylinder-looking small little thing, and you can see these individual little like cases, almost like an egg carton, but it's like sort of smushed together. Tiny little, so I didn't see the babies come out, but I've been watching and waiting.
Very, very cool. Yeah, finding a praying mantis egg case is a treat. My kids found one once, and we brought it home, and they're pretty amazing. Yeah. Very good stuff. Thank you. I can hear you, yeah.
First of all, I just want to thank you for your charisma. I think that that's so special and it really helps.
Oh yeah, I'm just hearing you.
Hi. Oh, here I am. Okay. Yeah, I want to thank you for your charisma. I feel like it's a lot easier to learn from someone who A, is very passionate, clearly, and B, like she said, injects humor. So that's marvelous. Thank you so much. It's easier for me to listen and be present and stay with you. And my question is actually about marsupials. So when I was really young and wanted to be a zoologist, I went through my animal phase. I used to get these things called zoo books, and I loved them so much. I learned a ton, and I did see like other photos of those, like, you know, seemingly embryonic babies. And I was thinking about it just now, like from your kangaroo photo, and I was wondering, do you know why they evolved to just be like so vulnerable when they're first? My theory just right now is that maybe the pouch is kind of like an external room, so it's like the right environment to keep developing where they're safe and they're getting what they need. So I just wondered if you could expand on that a little bit, if you know.
That's a great question. Thank you. Yes, I get excited because I'm like, oh, I know some things about this. So, so we have 3 flavors of mammal, as you may know.
Yeah.
We have the standard, like vanilla mammal, which is all of us. We're called placentals because we get pregnant, we have the baby inside a womb, and we have a placenta. And so that's your cats, your dogs, your mice, your horses, like kind of everything. And then you have the marsupials, which have the pouches, and that's your kangaroos and wallabies and wombats and everything. And then the 3rd flavor, which is like double rocky road with lavender, like weird, is the monotremes. And the monotremes lay eggs.
Yeah.
That's the echidnas and the platypuses. And what is wild, and I did not realize this when I was reading books like that, and it was much later that I learned it, is that they actually evolved in the opposite order of what I just gave them. So we placentals are the most recent kind of mammal. All mammals started out laying eggs. So like echidnas and platypuses, we were egg-laying animals. And so the thought is, and there's some paleontological work and I think genetic work to back this up, is the steps that happened in evolutionary history is that we started out laying eggs, and over time, some mothers would sort of kind of keep their eggs closer to them and try to fold them into their body to keep them extra safe. And those that had looser skin, like a pouch, those eggs were kept warmer, were kept safer, and over time the pouch evolved. And so it's almost like at the same time as that the eggs themselves were kind of like that seemed to be not necessary anymore to have it enclosed like that. I'm kind of hand waving like literally and figuratively here because there's a lot of detail that I don't know that maybe nobody knows. But that's kind of the direction that it happened. And then over time, having a pouch with your baby developing in the pouch evolved into just having the whole pregnancy thing, basically. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
I see a hand over here.
That cicada thing really kind of freaks me out when they all come out at the same time. But what happens to those adult cicadas that have shed? Do they go back into the earth or what?
So they all die, is the quick, short, sad story. But it's happy for them if they've managed to reproduce and to mate and lay eggs first. So over the course of a few weeks or months, they shed their skin. That one that is crawling out, its wings, you couldn't really see its wings, but over the course of just a few hours, they'll sort of come down like shower curtains, and then it'll be able to fly. And as its insides sort of harden up from being all soft and gooey, they'll be able to sing. And the males sing this really loud cicada song. If you've ever heard cicadas, we have cicadas here in California, so you may have heard them in the summer, but they're not periodical cicadas. They're annual cicadas. They come out every year, and they are pretty well camouflaged. I actually have a really hard time spotting them, even when I can hear them. And I'm like, I'm hearing cicadas, but I can't find them anywhere, because they're annual cicadas. They're hiding from predators, because there aren't enough of them to overwhelm the predators. Whereas the periodical cicadas, they also sing. It's a familiar sort of sound, but there's so many of of them that it gets really, really loud. And they're singing to attract a mate. If they manage to mate, then they lay eggs, and they're pretty much getting eaten the whole time. Like even things that don't normally eat bugs come out of the woodwork to eat cicadas. I talked to one entomologist who said that her dog made himself sick eating cicadas, and she had to keep him inside. Because they have no defense, like they can't sting, they can't bite. Like if you are an open-minded eater, they're easy to grab, they're easy to spot, like they're just a buffet, basically. So they just get eaten over the course of those few months of the spring and summer, basically. Yeah.
We have time for one more question.
Okay, thank you.
And I get that question.
What?
So,
But I'll be here for a while if you want to find me. Yeah,
so
go ahead.
as, you talked about parental care, and as a parent, I wondered if there's, in the wild animal world, there is the grandparent effect.
Oh, yes. Like the influence or importance of having grandparents around. There's a few species in which that's been studied. Citations, whales, orcas, and larger whale species are the ones that it's been most studied in, I think, where there are usually female, I think probably always female grandparents who will help with the rearing of their grandchildren, help get them food, help protect them, and it does seem to be really valuable for the survival and growth of those grandchildren. And I think there's a few other, I'm trying to remember what other species, I think elephants, yes, and maybe some other primates. Yeah, it's an interesting one. Thank you so much.
Okay, thanks.
I'll go sit down and get out of your way.
So in a few minutes, we'll just walk out down here, and you'll go where you came in. There's bar, crafts, and conversation. I just wanted to say something about the next first Wednesday. It's Dr. Robert Fisher from USGS and our own Aaron Lundy to present about our mountain yellow-legged frog conservation effort. And it's a really, really significant, we're making a difference, and I hope you come for it. And I also have to say, as an East Coaster and hearing about the cicadas, I've often wanted, there's two things from the East Coast I miss in California. One is the cicadas, because it's spectacular, and the second thing is fireflies. I wish we had fireflies out here. And on that note, enjoy the conversation.